Well, I hate to say it, but the United States should be prepared for war. This time against Russia. It's not just Venezuela. Right now, there's a lot of issues all around the world, and what we are seeing now has NATO under attack. Look at this right here. It says NATO raises alarm on Russia as Russia finalizes nuclear powered Berezovsky missile. This is just one of the reasons why we should be on high alert. But then there's this right here. It says, Poland warns Putin is preparing for war with NATO after railway line is blown up in unprecedented act of sabotage. What we are hearing is that Russia was behind this railway attack. Listen to this right here. It says, Russia is preparing for war against NATO. Poland's top general has warned after a railway track en route to Ukraine was damaged in an unprecedented act of sabotage. Goes on to say, Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces, Kukula, warned that Russia has begun the period of preparing for war and that they are building an environment here instead to create conditions favorable for potential aggression on Polish territory. Says a Russian military attack on Poland would trigger a response under NATO's Article 5, likely amounting to a third world war. General Kukula added that Russia was currently engaged in a pre-war situation, or what we refer to as a hybrid war. That doesn't sound good, okay? That is not good at all. But then there's this right here. It says Ukraine-Russia war latest. NATO member Romania evacuates villages after Putin's attack on tanker. So now there's not just an attack on this railway, there's an attack on a tanker. Listen to this. It says 2 Romanian villages have been evacuated after a Turkish flag tanker was struck by a drone and set ablaze on the NATO border. The MT Orinda was hit while offloading liquefied petroleum at Ismail port on the Romanian border on Monday. Footage from the Romanian side of the border showed firefighters on the Danube wrestling to bring the blaze under control. Dozens of people in Plaura and whatever that is were meanwhile evacuated amid fears the tanker could explode. The Romanian military in the area to scan for possible Russian drones were also withdrawn. This doesn't sound like Russia is playing nice with NATO, and the concern here is that if they attack a NATO nation, it's an attack on all NATO nations, which includes the United States. And right now, there's a lot of concern that President Trump and Vladimir Putin had some type of falling out, which was the reason why Vladimir Putin called President Trump, spoke to him for about 2 hours several weeks ago, and then the next day, President Trump did not give these cruise missiles, these Tomahawk cruise missiles, to Ukraine. That right there, and some were saying this, was Vladimir Putin playing the United States and President Trump. Then we learned that President Trump and Vladimir Putin were going to meet in the future. They're several weeks down the road, they were going to meet in person. And yet, about a week later, after President Trump said to President Zelensky of Ukraine that no, you can't have Tomahawk cruise missiles, well, after that, Vladimir Putin, he pulled out of that meeting and said it wasn't going to happen. President Trump confirmed that, saying that no, there was no point to have a meeting with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, if he's just going to waste his time, which is essentially what was happening. But look at this. NATO general warns Germany to boost defenses against hybrid threats. That was just announced today. It says, Germany must urgently strengthen its ability to deter both conventional and hybrid attacks. It says, at the start of a 2-day conference in Berlin focused on strengthening Europe's defenses, Gerhardt said, "Our main challenge is deterrence, and deterrence today and against all types of oppression." He stressed that to fend off a growing number of hybrid attacks, Germany needs rapid reforms in military procurement, swift implementation of the new military service law, and a society-wide strengthening of defense preparedness. Says, to transform pure investment into deterrence, institutions need to change, processes must be adapted, and most important, our whole society must come on board. Okay. All that does not sound like the United States is going to be left out of another war. And I talked about this earlier on today, that the United States currently has amassed a large military presence in the Caribbean. We still have, people in other countries, we still have warships, we still have things around the world, but we've amassed a large military, presence in the Caribbean. Like 15,000 soldiers as well. The reason for this is because of a potential war or an escalation between the United States and Venezuela and really Latin America. But what I said earlier was the United States and President Trump specifically is trying to bring down prices. One of the things he knows is going to happen is if we have a war, prices are going to go up. One of the quickest ways to bring down prices is to reduce the cost of energy, which means you bring the cost of gas down. In order to do that, you need oil. Who has the largest amount of oil in the world? It's Venezuela. That's, according to reports, why President Trump is targeting Venezuela. With that said, if the United States attacks Venezuela or responds to these attacks from Russia to NATO nations, it's going to cause prices to go up around the world, not just in the United States. Now, I want to read a couple other things to you. Okay? Look at this right here. It says, Russia has finalized development of its nuclear-powered Borisnik cruise missile, a weapon that Western intelligence assesses could pose a significant threat to NATO defenses, according to a classified alliance document. Says the missile, known to NATO as the SSC-X-9 Skyfall, can reach speeds of more than 900 kilometers per hour, is highly maneuverable, and can be launched from mobile platforms, according to the documents. Says Russian President Vladimir Putin announced successful test of the missile 3 weeks ago, after which President Trump said if Russia is going to test missiles, then the United States is going to do the same thing. However, Russia was testing the nuclear missile capabilities. President Trump said, we are going to test nuclear missiles. He said nuclear missiles, which many people in the United States were absolutely freaked out. How do we test nuclear missiles right here in the U.S., especially above ground? That's one thing that hasn't happened in decades. Now, here's the last thing I just want to say. Okay, and it has to do with this railway. Look at this right here. It says, okay, Putin is creating a certain atmosphere here aimed at undermining public trust in the government, in key structures such as the armed forces and the police, as well as creating conditions favorable to potential aggression on Polish territory. Again, Poland is a NATO nation. It says, Vladimir Putin will return to our Baltic borders with even more troops and military equipment than he had before the full-scale invasion, within 2 to 3 years or less, he warned. He says the Kremlin dictator's aims were to conquer Ukraine, to dominate its near abroad, to divide the West, and to push the U.S. out of Europe. He says the statements came just after the explosion caused damage to the Warsaw-Lublin line that connects the Polish capital to the Ukrainian border. If Ukraine can't get the supplies they need, people are going to leave. If people leave, it makes it easier for Russia to take over those regions. Russia wants Ukraine. They're not going to leave without almost all of Ukraine. At least that's what we're hearing. And the United States is highly unlikely to step in and force Russia out, which means we are going to see this war continue, meaning that Russia is likely going to strike a NATO nation here in the very near future. And as they do, we'll see what the United States response is, but as of right now, it could be serious and it could be catastrophic, not just for the United States, but for the entire world. So, just wanted to share that with you because I know a lot of people are asking what's going on over there with Russia. How is this going to impact Europe? Well, you're seeing it right here. Europe is already feeling the threat, and they want the United States to step in and NATO to step in and push Russia back. So, we'll see what happens over the very near future, but as of right now, that is what we know. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.